Welcome to the first episode of the Lift Big Eat Big show. We don't actually have a fancy name for it yet, but we're going to go with LBEB show. Number one, we're live. If you're listening to this on podcast or YouTube later, obviously it's not live, but it was live, so make sure you join next week when it's live. But today we have myself, James DeLacy, and we have two incredible athletes with us. My athletic prowess does not live up to these two. We have Mona Pretorius, or Mona DeLacy, my wife, 6 times karate world champ, CrossFit Games athlete, Commonwealth Games medalist in weightlifting, African champion, plus much more. We have Colm Wolfe joining us as well from the strongman side, representing the big guys. 2 times world's strongest man competitor, New Zealand's strongest man, all sorts of experience going on in this podcast. But we've got a few things for you guys today. We're going to cover some news around the powerlifting world records. We're going to cover some of the weightlifting scandals, some of the stuff Colm has from the strongman world as well. But we're going to start with some fitness style or training style, I guess we could say, knowledge. And we want to go into a little bit into the debate in areas around short and long muscle length training. There's been back and forth all over social media around short muscle length, long muscle length training and its effects for maximizing muscle growth or hypertrophy. I know, Colm, I think you went through some of the studies that I sent you there as well. Any first thoughts on that as we dive into it?
Overall, I think it's like a promising. We definitely need more research, but I think it's given us some good information to make some recommendations based off of what's there under certain conditions. So not for everyone, but under certain conditions for sure. I think there's some good research there.
Yeah, and obviously when we're looking at a lot of the short and long muscle length training, we need to, I guess, decipher between the different studies and what they're showing. So there's some that actually, so when we talk about short and long muscle length, let's maybe define some of the stuff. When we're talking extreme long muscle lengths, the studies that show the big gains are through biarticular muscles. So we're talking muscles that cross the knee, but also, well, for example, the hamstrings, that cross the knee and the hip, or if we're talking about biceps, they cross the elbow and the shoulder. Same with the triceps, crosses the elbow and the shoulders. So it means when you're going to go stretch or train a muscle through a full range of motion, in that instance, you're getting an extreme stretch when you say, for example, with the triceps, you're going to flex the elbow and you're going to extend or flex the shoulder. In that case, you get a far longer stretch than the other tricep heads, which only flex the elbow, only extend the elbow. So that extreme stretch is what potentially, or what seems to promote that larger, I guess, more gains in hypertrophy. The mechanisms behind it aren't well known. A lot of them talk about, maybe enhanced metabolic stress or the buildup of waste products, essentially like that feeling like when you're getting a pump. But then the other research is also interesting as well, because there's a bunch of stuff on, for example, training biceps, and they looked at bottom range partials versus top range partials. And while that's on the preacher curl, and while that's not considered, I guess, a long muscle length, it's basically training a muscle at a longer length versus a shorter length, showing that the longer length is superior. Now, obviously, not every muscle and not everything has to be a long muscle length trained. Like, for example, the big knee-jerk reaction is to now go to everything long muscle length. I think the big knee-jerk reaction was, I think, what Brett Contreras was talking about. Hey, people were talking about how now the hip thrust sucks because it doesn't have long muscle length within it, and so it's not good for glute hypertrophy, which is completely false, as we know. I know, Mona, you love a bit of the hip thrust too. And myself, I've used it a fair amount of times too, and it's a great glute builder. So not everything has to then become this long muscle length kind of thing within your program. You need to still have exercises that create that large amount of tension as well. Are there any exercises in particular, Colm or Mona, that you like to use in this instance?
Who wants to go first?
You can go first, that's fine.
Colm, you're in.
Well, I'm a big fan of seated hamstring curl, and then also the overhead tricep extension. Like both of those have been used in some of the research. And I think most of the studies, right, they're comparing the long muscle length exercise with a shorter one. Sometimes they have a crossover group, and those are more the studies that I like when they have, so long muscle length, short muscle length, and then they'll sometimes have a group that does a little bit of both. Like there's one that's on squats, and I think the one of the hamstring ones that you sent me had like a combined group as well. And I think, like, to me, that's a little bit more applicable.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea that it seems pretty clear that if you're only going to do one or the other, so if you're like, let's say you've got 20 minutes or something, you're a very busy person, you don't have much time to train, and you've only got 20 minutes, you're better off choosing that longer muscle length exercise. So for, again, like overhead tricep extension, fantastic one. Seated hamstring curl opposed to a shorter length one. But I do think, like, if you've got a longer time period, you shouldn't just, like James is alluding to, you don't just suddenly want everything to be long muscle length, because there are, like, what's the words, like specificity to the range of motion of the activity that you're wanting to do. For example, if you wanted to jump higher, a great option, like, to start off with full squats for sure, but you could do some jump squats. That's likely, once you've been training for a while, that's likely to improve your jump more than, just exclusively full squats. So I don't, just like James was saying, don't, what was the term he used? Don't go full, like, it doesn't all
don't
have
go
to
full
be
retard.
one range of motion. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of specific exercises, I quite like seated hammy curl. Like, I really love seated hammy curl.
Yeah.
I quite like that it's easy to do as well, like to overload the eccentric if you go 2 legs down and then you can just do a single leg on the way up. So that way you're getting that full, like, it's a long range of motion, long muscle length exercise. You're getting to load it eccentrically as well, which will help, or should hopefully help prevent injuries in terms of sprinting and whatnot. And then I personally am a little bit biased with the overhead tricep one because I've had a tricep rupture. And when I look back at my training, so being a big guy, I was a lot bigger then as well. I wasn't doing a lot of flexibility work, but I like the idea of having these longer length, like, exercises in there. Kind of forces you to do a little bit of stretch. So overhead wise, I wasn't doing any of that. So doing the overhead position, it's going to make the tricep cross two joints have a bit more of a stretch, opposed to just doing a rope pull down where, like, this and then pulling down. And I feel like if I had just had some of those in my training, like, so this is anecdotal, but I do feel like that has a benefit. To maintain a certain level of flexibility, even if it's just a little bit. If we're talking about heavyweight strongmen who are just naturally very tight, I think it's worth having in there.
Yeah, keep up with the anecdotal stuff too, because people love to hear your experiences with certain things too. But I know, Mona, you actually do use a lot of it at the end of your training too. For example, we would do those lat stretches on the lat pull down or dumbbell pullovers and things. What any thoughts, anything to add there with adding those at the end of your training?
I'm definitely a fan of it, and very similar to what Cole mentioned now with regarding, like, the stretch. I mean, you two are more the expertise in these kind of fields, and I would also often just kind of follow what James will prescribe for me with those kind of things in training, because obviously with me, my expertise fall more into, like, the Olympic lifting side, where the squats, for example, and things like that. But I'm a big fan of it, just because if I do any bodybuilding type exercises, the last thing I do want is to be stiff or immobile when I go back to my weightlifting. So I really do enjoy adding those in, so that if I do something like that in the off season and I do decide, okay, I'm going to go back to my Olympic lifting, because I'm not a naturally flexible athlete or mobile, I do tend to find that if I neglect it, that's probably one of the things that does bite me in the butt first. Like, I have to work on my mobility again, because then I get things like my wrist pain and shoulder pain and things like that back really quickly. If you ever, like Colm was saying, with regard to, like, your timing of training and you don't have a lot of time, I think stuff like that is just really important to take note, that if you do different sports or do different training methods, just take into consideration how it can affect you long term.
Yeah, for sure. And there's, I think people need to also realize that strength training through these full ranges of motion is more effective than stretching for mobility and flexibility. When we actually doing static stretching, we don't get any structural change within the muscle. When we're actually doing this kind of stretching stuff, we get structural change, so we get permanent change in range of motion versus flexibility when you don't. And that's an important thing to have, especially if anyone wants a sport and competes in something in some kind of sport. That's important to have, obviously. And then there are some more applications with long muscle length training as well. Like, as you mentioned with the seated leg curl, Colm, leaning forward on the seated leg curl is boss. That is like the absolute killer when you get to the top. That's another way to make it more extreme. But there's more things you can do too. You can use end range as partials at the end of a set as an intensity technique. So, for example, if you're doing like, it could be anything like bicep curls. If you're doing curls, you do maybe a set of 10 close to failure, and then you do like another 6 to 10 of just bottom range partials. That's another way of doing it. And essentially you're adding an intensity technique, and that can be something you cycle into your training too.
Yeah, that was definitely interesting in terms of that study where they were doing like the preacher curl. So for anyone listening, just doing the bottom half was more effective than just doing the top half. So
we don't know how that compares to doing the full movement because they didn't cover that.
But like if you want to throw in an intensity technique at the end, and you like that style of training, it seems like a good option from the info that we have there.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, most people use a lot of these low muscle length things without probably even think about. Romanian deadlifts is another one for the hamstrings. All the things you're probably using, but just remember, it's more than just something you're going to use for maximizing muscle growth. Again, it's going to be something that's going to maintain or improve your mobility, flexibility, things like that. And obviously, jump in.
I was going to add, if like, for example, you're a weightlifter, things like pulls from platform, or like Romanian deadlifts from platform, although those are the kind of things that will help weightlifters. Now I'm asking this question to you being more the expert in it. Or both you and Colm. What do you think?
Yeah, well, you use it for technical aspects, right?
Yes.
That
helps, creates the pull longest, and it teaches you to stay over the bar longer. So when you go back to lifting from the floor, you're going to hopefully carry that feeling over, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So 100%. 100%.
Well, I meant like to build it as well, not
for sure. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure Colm's used a shit ton of deficit deadlifts in his life.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think there's a benefit of having those in, like you guys are talking about, just for the mobility sake, especially for strongmen as well. Like if you're doing deficits, it's going to help with your starting position for the stones. But otherwise, again, if time-wise, just do stones. You're going to be like, your hammy has to be in such a big lengthened position anyway as you're pulling it off the floor, depending on what technique you're using. But you need to be able to do that well, especially if you're like different styles in competition. Let's say you've got a fast stone run. If you're mobile enough to hit that position, you can do a one motion very quickly, a one motion stone lift, which is going to give you a faster time. So it's worth, I do think, like overall, not just looking at that specific long length, but it's good to maintain like a certain level of touching many different movements, so you're somewhat ready for anything really, in strongman anyway.
Yeah, no, that's good advice too. But I think we'll end that little segment there, and we'll go straight on to some of the upcoming news, or some of the previous news as well. Colm, we had powerlifting world records. Was it the weekend just gone that this happened?
Yeah.
I saw videos of it all over Twitter and stuff. Do you want to maybe dive into what happened there?
Yep. So we had, hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Jesus Oliveira, was it?
Yep.
Some absolutely ridiculous lifting. So 470, 272, and 410 in the IPF. So what I like, there's obviously the IPF is drug tested, so that's the first thing a lot of people bring up. But even regardless of that, he's broken the all-time record, and he's on sleeves. Like personally, what I find, it's impressive regardless, right? No matter what kind of bar. But the IPF, they use the same barbell on all three lifts. And for such a big guy, so yeah, they use the same barbell, and they always use those combo racks, which I like as a big guy. I hate it because they're just hard to fit in, to be honest. Like the bench is always the same width, which I personally feel is a little bit too narrow for the big guys. While he's not as tall as me, he's still he weighed in 390, I believe. So what's that in
Oh,
kgs?
that's like it's like 170,
Quickly
170,
work it
180
out.
kilos.
177 according to this.
There you go.
So yeah, he's a big dude, and to hit those numbers, and that way as well. Like have you guys seen like the squat? He definitely fought for the squat, but like the deadlift was just ridiculous. 900 pounds. So on the stiff bar, you got to remember a lot
Damn.
of the world records nowadays. Like I'm not the biggest fan of it, but they're making more specific deadlift bars over time. So now there's a Kabuki deadlift bar, which is meant to be, I think it's a little bit longer perhaps, or a little bit more flex than a Texas deadlift bar. So like as time goes on, they seem to be allowing a little bit more in terms of these other federations, whereas the IPF is always that same bar. And for him to hit 900 pounds after the previous lifts, in the manner that he hit it, and no grip issues, like it's honestly, it's really insane. Whether it's tested or non-tested, like it's insane, and the fact that it is tested is even more insane. And it does make me think. I was thinking the other day. I'll be curious to see what you guys think, but like, I really wonder where the ceiling of human potential is, because in the grand scheme of it, I feel like powerlifting is still like relatively young in terms of advanced training techniques and whatnot. And you know, like back in the day, like now people follow diets, now people have structured training.
Yeah.
Opposed to back in the day, was it Paul Anderson, that dude who used to just squat his barrels, dig a hole and squat his barrels?
I've got the book in the bookshelf back there. I'll have to pull it out.
Yeah. So I think like, yeah, training and everything's getting more and more advanced, and the attitude of some of these top athletes where some of them even say it, they're basically willing to die. They're willing to do anything to get a good result. So it does make me think, and he's untested, but let's say untested as well. Like, I really do wonder what the limits of strength are going to be. I think they're going to keep getting bigger and bigger.
Is there prize money yet? Like big enough prize money for people to be able to train full time yet within powerlifting, or is it still?
So they did have prize money for that one. I don't know it off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure it was a decent one. So they're looking to run that one annually, and it should be like a pretty good one going forward.
Yeah, because I can imagine as prize money goes up, the more people that come into this. So I mean, obviously there's freak athletes there, but I think the freakiest of freak athletes are all in the NFL and things like that, because that pays the most money, right? So if you had some of those guys come into a sport like that, you've got you've got bigger records going. Yeah,
that's pretty scary to think about. What about in terms of weightlifting? Would you say, like, let's say the NFL, I would say the majority, like 99% of them, are got to be absolute just freak athletes. Strongman, there is a lot of freaks, but I wouldn't say it's not near the NFL kind of level at all at the moment. Same with powerlifting. What about weightlifting?
So it's funny that you guys are talking about, or when you were mentioning now, where's the ceiling? So currently at the moment, it's the Youth Weightlifting World Championships. And for the first time ever in history of weightlifting, there are 12-year-olds, 2 Canadian girls that made history, who's the youngest ever girls. One won gold, and the other one, I think she won bronze. And normally those kind of competitions, the world gets dominated by like the Eastern Bloc countries, but also from a lot of countries who has allegedly doping and who has been tested positive numerous times. Now, these countries that has now podiumed are from countries who are fully clean, natural athletes, youth athletes lifting heavier than, a lot of athletes. If I'm mistaken, the girl who won gold in the 40 kg class, the youth athlete who's 12, did a total of 177 kilograms. And my thoughts today was, when I was reading all of the results, was this is insane for a youth athlete to be totaling that amount
Yeah.
for a girl weighing less than 40 kilograms. Techniques are
What's
solid. Oh, sorry, yes.
what's the age group?
So
12.
so the youngest is 12 that can compete in
Yeah.
the youth, and then it's up to, so for youth it's up to 17. It's either 17 or 18 if I'm not mistaken. Normally when I've competed, it's up to the year that you turn 17. I don't think that rule has changed. And then junior is up until the year you turn 21. So yeah, these kids are lifting an insane amount of weight, and it amazes me. Like, I'm watching it and I'm like, it blows my mind. Obviously it's amazing to see, but it also shows you that, like, the human potential for, clean athletes. And yes, obviously you do get the athletes who dope, and that's also why, there's a lot of scandals and stuff going on in weightlifting regarding, just a lot of doping going on, and weightlifting being at risk for not being at the 2028 Olympics. But like I said, these weights and medals are coming from athletes from clean countries. So that actually it gives a clean athlete hope that you can actually also get on the platform. And it just shows you, once a clean athlete has also shown their potential and they can lift that weight, you will get more and more athletes who will then be able to lift that weight.
Would you say, so this, where's the 12-year-old from?
Canada.
Would
so it's
you,
two Canadian athletes.
like, if you had to, would you say her success is, like, is she more of a genetic freak? Have they got, like, fantastic training program, or just combination of all the above?
Well, I think honestly might be genetics, because I do know that a lot of Canadian athletes aren't actually training with Canadian coaches. A lot of them actually have American coaches and will travel back and forth. And I know also from, what I've heard, it's not the easiest federations and stuff to deal with, very similar to what I have gone through in my weightlifting career. So a lot of these athletes, I won't go into detail, but a lot of these athletes
Not on this
do
episode,
struggle.
another episode.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the athletes struggle financially. So, for example, there are athletes who have won Olympic medals for Canada, but they're not even like fully funded, or, they don't get the support, like, for example, what other countries might be getting. Like we know from, like, again, Eastern Bloc countries, how they will get stipends and full-on salaries and will never have to work in their life. Their family will be supported. And it doesn't happen. There's no training camps. There's no, sending the athletes, overseas and keeping them there for 6 months in a year, or, going to sports school. So honestly, it can only be, in my opinion, genetically, they are lucky. Canada's lucky. They got really good athletes. Like, for example, one of my close friends, Maud Sharon, she's actually an Olympic gold medalist, and she just won gold now at the Pan American Championships too. And Maud is one of those people. She is an amazing athlete. Her coach is American, so she travels back and forth doing training camps with him. I know she was also, wanting to become a policewoman. So that was something she was even doing in between training and prepping for things like Olympics and all of those. So living normal lives like, all of us are living, having to support yourself financially, having to work, having to go to school and study something that will give you a future, and not just in sport. So like I said, I think Canada just has amazing athletes, and I hope that these athletes get the support that they need. And I do hope that they actually do end up staying in the sport, because those are the athletes that we need for the future of weightlifting. Hoping that they sort things out and weightlifting stays in the Olympics for 2028.
Yeah. Before we go into some of those weightlifting scandals as well, we got a couple of comments on YouTube. We got Thomas saying Thor is training for all-time powerlifting record and he's documenting it on YouTube. So maybe there's something for you, Colm, to follow along. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. And then V replied to you Mona saying that she's guilty. She's a Canadian athlete with an international coach. I wonder who that international coach is. Maybe that's a secret for now. We'll reveal that in another episode. But I know there's some murmurings going around in the weightlifting world, Mona. I mean, there always is, because there's always, I mean, this is our podcast. I can say what I want, right? There's always dumb fucks within these sports and stupid ass idiots running these organizations. And it's not just in weightlifting; it's in so many sports. I know, Colm, you've been deep into the strongman world as well, and corruption's everywhere. So, Mona, do you want to maybe dive into a little bit of what's going on at the moment there?
Yes, I mean, like if you follow along, and not just, what the athletes are lifting, but also kind of the news behind, the scenes and weightlifting. Like a lot of two really big events are running at the moment. So like I mentioned, the Youth Weightlifting World Championships, and then also the Pan American Championships, where there's a whole bunch of amazing athletes, like I said, from Canada, from America, and then a whole bunch of other countries. Unfortunately, Colombia is not there. So the Pan Ams this year is in Argentina, and Colombia, who's got was actually rated the strongest team that was going to compete at the Pan American Championships, had 20 athletes entered, and out of those 20, there's 2 world champions, and there's also an Olympic medalist. And this Pan Ams was also one of the qualification events for Olympics, for the 2024 Olympics that's coming up. And due to, basically Argentina saying that, the athletes that are coming over has to pay in cash when they get there, this has caused a huge uproar, and this has caused the Colombian team to withdraw from the Pan American Championships. And again, the athletes are affected at the end of the day. And the reason why this is something that actually, it made me mad reading it, because it's something that I have gone through myself as well, competing internationally, at all my Olympic qualification events, at so many international events before that. You will go and compete, but a lot of the times, there's problems with athletes arriving with huge amounts of cash. So these countries want you to pay everything in cash. Where, for example, if it's a team of 20, they have to pay entry fee for each athlete. They have to pay accommodation for each athlete, which the accommodation gets ramped up at these events. And then they have to pay a doping control fee as well. So the countries end up, like I said, having to pay tens and thousands of dollars. And for a country that has to carry that amount of cash to another country, can be really dangerous. I mean, even for myself that used to travel from South Africa to an overseas country, I would never even walk around with cash. So you would want to come to these countries and pay with a credit card or a debit card, or do a bank transfer or something like that. But they actually do not want to accept it at all. So a lot of countries can't afford to travel with cash, like I said, and it's costed one of the strongest teams in the world that, they had to withdraw. And like I
wonder
said,
why you have to only pay cash.
So are they literally just pocketing it?
Well,
I won't say it. Yeah, allegedly. But there's definitely, I mean, even if you go and read Inside the Games, they're very open about that kind of stuff in there. They mention some stuff also about tax and just things where a lot of countries have had problems with this kind of way of how they deal with competitions, where normally if you enter, there could be a link. I don't know if it's the same with powerlifting or strongman, Colm. You'll normally get a link and you can just do like a transfer, super easy, pay your amounts.
I've never had someone ask for cash for the entry fees.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless it's for something dodgy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it blows my mind that in this, this century, that people are still dealing with cash like that. You can do everything online now. Crazy. Why not get people to do those kind of things, or help you, or spend money, making it accessible to, countries worldwide? Because even reading in that article with the Inside the Games, where they made this news public, really strong countries like, for example, Canada and USA has had problems with athletes going over and having to pay cash. Because like I said, if you have a team of 20 or 30 athletes having to travel with that amount of cash, it's honestly, it's insane. So that is one thing that I'm hoping in the future, weightlifting will change. Like I said, now you can see some of the strongest countries, having to pull out of competition because they can't afford to pay that money cash. So that's currently going on in the weightlifting world. And obviously on top of that, like I said earlier, this will affect the Colombian team's qualification for the 2028 Olympics. And this takes away one of the major competitions that they had to do in order to qualify, or for the 2024. And then obviously for the athletes, or, just weightlifting in general, trying to be in the 2028 Olympics, they have to clean up their act. So hopefully they are going to do it. And hopefully our sport will stay in the Olympics. But I guess only time will tell right now.
Yeah, we'll have to go into a little bit of that in another episode, Mona, with this whole Olympic debacle with the weightlifting. But what's funny as well, Colm, it's not just the country's currency you got to bring. You have to bring US dollars in cash too.
Yes,
it has to be US. It has to be US dollars. And then they open it. Remember, Mona, when we were waiting at the table at it was in Qatar, right? And they open their little kitty, and it's just filled with like American dollars cash that they've been paid. And it's like in this little kitty box. And it's like, okay, and then they inflate the hotel price, so it's not a normal hotel rate. You pay like $100 more per night for the room.
That's why I say they really push it up. Like it's crazy. And you are not allowed, and you are not allowed to stay at another hotel. So if you have to stay in that specific hotel for X amount of days that they tell you to stay in, because they also, if they decide the day after your competition or the day prior, they want to dope test you, you need to be in that hotel. So that's one of the reasons, or that's what they say is one of the reasons. But obviously it's one of those things where it makes a person wonder, why are they still doing this?
When they do that in strongman, like you have to stay at a certain hotel, it's because you're getting a good deal, like it's a sponsorship deal, not because they're trying to charge you an extra $100 a night or whatever.
Exactly.
But what I was going to ask, what's the hierarchy? So is this the Argentinian weightlifting organization? Like, is that their name?
It's all the IWF, but
it falls under the International Weightlifting Federation. But because Argentina is the host country, they will be dealing with those kind of things.
So they're like their country's version. Like they're representing the IWF for their country. Like, what's above them? Is there a whole IWF like commission or something?
Yes. So the International Weightlifting Federation, like you said, the IWF, they are the above ones. They are the top. It can't go higher than that. And then you've got your national federations under that, and then you've got your I'd say your local. I won't say local federations, but more so clubs that will fall under your national federations then.
But you're paying the IWF, right, when you go into these competitions?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
so it is going to the top.
Yeah. It is going to the top, yes. So there is, obviously, there must be some sort of a deal as well, because obviously the host country has to organize everything, even though the IWF are the ones that will, approve the event. But Argentina has to come up with a venue and a hotel and all of those things. So I'm sure there's some sort of a deal going on between them.
And then the IWF works with the Olympic Committee.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So above the IWF in all sports, it would be the IOC, like you said now, but in weightlifting, the IWF is the top. You can't get higher than that. But the IOC, obviously, at the moment, they are overseeing a lot of what's going on in weightlifting. They're keeping a very close eye on weightlifting and the IWF because they want to see the IWF cleaning up their act. They want to see the IWF making the changes that they've recommended to them. and they've come out publicly saying if they do not make these changes, then obviously our sport will not be in the Olympics anymore, which will be such a shame if this had to happen, because for a lot of countries, for a lot of athletes, this is what they know. This is, this is the way they make money. This is their job in a sense. And like I said, for athletes that, they get basically a stipend, and their families are supported through that money. So yeah, there's a lot of athletes where this is their be all and end all. But then also for other countries like South Africa and New Zealand and Australia and those kind of countries, having the sport in the Olympics means a lot for us, because it also opens up a lot of doors, even though we are not at a stage yet where we can become full on paid professional athletes. But it's definitely getting better step by step. Some federations obviously is a lot slower than others, or countries are a lot slower than others, but it does it has become a lot more popular over the years, and you would want it to continue in that trend growing. So I'm really hoping that they don't cut it out.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a whole episode on this at some point as well, because Mona's obviously been involved heavily in the upper management area with the IWF Athletes Commission, and then everything else you've been a part of, Mona, as well. But did you have anything else to ask there, Colm? I think I might have cut you off.
Oh, there's heaps of stuff I could have but maybe save it.
Yeah, that's all good. Before we jump into some strongman news, Colm, I want to know, you mentioned how Jesus and him being 177 kilos, so 390 or whatever odd pounds. You've been at that weight, haven't you, or just above it?
Yep. At my heaviest, I never, at my very heaviest, I didn't want to see what was on the scale. But I would have been about 185. So the heaviest I've seen on the scale was 182. So 400 pounds. And then I ended up gaining, I definitely gained more weight, more fat. And then I would have been about 185, yeah.
Is that what you competed at the World's Strongest Man, at that weight?
I was just under 180 when I was there. I think the first year I was about 175, and the second year about 177. But I definitely, the hard part, I got a lot better as a strongman actually after I was at Worlds, at a lighter body weight. So I enjoyed eating that much, but I definitely wouldn't say it was optimal. But I also do think, let's say I wanted to do powerlifting and that was my absolute focus, I think I would have to get up to that sort of weight again. Because if you look at a lot of those top powerlifters, like Jesus, Ray Williams, all that, they are maxing out how heavy they are for their height. And me being a taller guy, I'm about 6'5". I would just have to be a lot thicker to be able to, what's Ray Williams? He's about 400 pounds, isn't he?
I'm not too sure.
But yeah, they're big boys, so it would be for powerlifting. That's what you need to do, really. Just put as many kgs per inch of height on as you can. But obviously, then it depends. We're talking about super heavyweight powerlifting here. If you're in a weight class, then you're in a weight class.
Yeah, for sure. I'm surprised you haven't gone into bodybuilding with being 6'5" and being you're 140 kilos right now, aren't you? Or 120 to 140. You could bloody be
at the moment, but
you could just be a jacked as massive bodybuilder.
I would be. I reckon I'm still pretty fat. If I drop down, I'd be so skinny, especially on stage.
Well, I think what I want to know, and probably what the listeners might want to know, is what is a typical day of eating being 180 kilos or 405 pounds?
So when I was that big, I would eat still relatively clean, to be honest. I am, I guess, blessed or cursed, depending on what way you want to look at it, being able to eat a lot. I can eat a lot. And my whole family is like that, to be honest. I've got cousins that are much bigger than I am, both in height and weight. And we can just eat. But normally, so when I was in Brisbane, I used to eat a lot of rice, a lot of kangaroo, because it was cheap and it's red meat. I quite enjoyed it. And Steak wise, I didn't really have too much steak to be honest, but I would say the majority rice. Um, Basically, I would have rice, some kind of meat, and a little bit of veggies. And then once a week though, um, I would have like, and this is in Brisbane, Australia. They would have like, I think it was called. It was like a cheap Tuesdays thing, right? At the takeaway
Yeah.
places. So I'd get like one of those Eagle Boys. It was like two pizzas for $9, something like this.
It's something
Um,
James would definitely go for.
I've
yeah,
eaten whole family meals before from like Wendy's
yeah,
and McDonald's stuff. Yeah, I've done it. I used to
and
do it
then
every now and then.
and I bet you felt horrible afterwards, eh?
Oh, yes, you did.
Yeah, because that's what led me. I would do this every Tuesday, and then like Tuesday night, I would have the worst sleep. I would feel absolutely horrible, and then I'd go and do it again. And like
Sounds
they
so
had
familiar.
$9 for 9 pieces of KFC, and I would like eat that and eat other stuff as well. And then eventually, one day, I had that thought: I better not do this next Tuesday, and I managed to break the cycle.
Oh, wow.
Um, but
Oh
yeah,
man.
basically, I would eat. I also tended not to eat. Like they recommend eat 6 times a day or whatever.
Yeah.
I actually tended to eat just 3 times a day. I would have a pre-workout shake, like like a pre-work, like I would drink it pre and during, so it was
Yeah.
just carbs. Sometimes I would put a scoop of protein in there if it was one I could digest well. But I would pretty much eat 3 meals a day, but my dinners were always just gigantic. Um, that
So did
was
you
so
have to
I
have
didn't
like
really.
a special plate
Yeah, I would
for
just
your
have
dinners?
one of those big. It's like a big salad bowl basically,
Yeah.
Oh
and
yeah.
just load that up. Also, it wasn't healthy at all, but I would have a lot of bread. Like a lot of bread and butter was easy. I could have I could just put that on anything really. Um, like 4 pieces of toast with some butter on it, add it to every meal. It was super easy. But yeah, it wasn't the healthiest, but it was cheap.
Nice.
So that was more of a priority for me back then, over health. And yeah, it wasn't ideal, and I did get better when I dropped weight. Um, but yeah, it's nice to think like there were some perks about being that big for sure. Like in the gym, anything static wise just went through the roof for me, other than squats
Mm.
because I had some knee issues. But every single week it was just I would be able to lift more just because I was gaining body weight, especially
Yeah.
pressing wise. Cardio wise, I was absolutely horrible. So um, like at World Strongest Man, the 2017 one, our first event was a loading race. So you carried 210 kg sacks down like 15 meters, run back and drag a heavy sled. And I knew just being that big, there was no way. I was up against Tom Stoltman and another guy called Matthias, called Belsac, and they were both super fast on their feet. I knew I had no chance. So I just coasted so slow on the 2 sacks. Like it wasn't a heavy weight, but just me running 15 meters, I gassed myself. And then I got to the heavy sled, and because I was so heavy, I ended up beating them in that event.
Oh well.
Because I had the body weight and I had saved my energy for that last part of the event. So that was like a benefit of being heavy in that kind of event where you're using your body weight as a lever. I
Mm.
definitely benefited from it.
Yeah, we're gonna
Did
do a
you?
whole episode on bulking.
Yeah,
Just
I was
because
actually
of the
gonna.
feedback.
I was gonna ask Cole now. Did you kind of just track how your body weight was tracking up, or did you actually eat a set amount of calories each day?
So when I was at my biggest, I was actually seeing someone for a diet at the time, and I started maybe on 7,000 calories, and I ended up on 7.5, and I ended up stopping because like I felt like I was just getting fatter and fatter, which I was, and he felt like I was gaining more lean mass, or he would say that I was gaining more lean mass. Um, but so at that time I was tracking, and the meals were it was the same thing, like lots of rice. I could eat so much rice, and then I was having a lot of chicken thigh at that time and a lot of veggies. And it like when I was eating that much, it was pretty hard just because of what it was. So chicken, rice and veggies, like these meals are huge. And I was eating like 4 times a day then. And yeah, it just costed so much money and took up a lot of time, and I was constantly full. But at that time we were tracking, and that was before Australia's Strongest Man. So I did, like, training wise, it was great, and there wasn't too much in terms of events that needed much like movement in terms of conditioning. So it worked well for me. But yeah, about 7,500 calories is what I had at the end, and like my face honestly just ballooned. It was like that typical moon face. I gained so much weight. I would have gone, like, that's when I would have probably been like 175 when I started with him, and then that's when I ended, when I didn't want to step on the scale, because I just put on weight so fast. Like, already being that big, I reckon it was like maybe 6 or 7 weeks, I must have gained like another 10 kgs.
Oh,
And, yeah, but because of that, like, I gained it so fast. I was lifting so much more, but it just wasn't sustainable, and I didn't really like it, and I was just getting fatter at that point.
yeah, fair enough. Now we're gonna have to do a bulking episode coming up, for sure, with things we've all done to gain weight, because I know I've done a fair few things.
I need advice, because James is always trying to get me to try and gain weight, and
we'll do an intervention episode for Mona.
Yeah,
Coleman James eating intervention for Mona, how to gain weight. I've done all sorts of things too. I mean, I was a skinny hard gainer back in the day, and I ended up bulking my way up a fair amount. But we had another comment from Thomas talking about, I don't know if Coleman, if you know of a nutritionist named Nathan Payton. Apparently he's a nutritionist for a lot of pro strongmen. I don't know if you know.
I've never met him.
Okay.
But I do know of him. Yeah, he works with quite a lot of the top pros. Is there a specific question about him, or?
Nope, just a little comment. I just thought it out there for some audience engagement.
It is interesting, because he used to be Brian Shaw's nutritionist when he kind of first won his World's Strongest Man's, like his first run. And then Brian left.
He went to Stanley Fitting, did he?
Yeah, he did. So that's where I always kind of felt like, just as a fan, I felt like he was doing so well with Nathan Payton, and then he kind of left. And Thor, I think at the time, was working with Stan Efferding, and then everyone kind of went over to Stan Efferding.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah, I remember that phase.
He's gone. Well, he's still going, but everyone's kind of left and now everyone's with Nathan Payton. So it's interesting, and I do think it's one of those things. Like, I think as an athlete, you're always trying to find that little edge, even if it's a small amount. And like, sometimes it can be hard to accept that, like, there is a limit to how fast you can progress, and there's a limit to, essentially how much gains you can make per like hour, right? You can't just go, it's not exponential. It's not just going to go up forever. Yeah. So if you, even like, I'm putting words in the head, but let's say Brian, he didn't win Worlds that year that he saw Thor win. He must have thought like, oh, this vertical diet seems like it might be, maybe this is going to give me that little edge, and he's gone there, even though he seemed to be going fairly well. Although I do know he was talking about some digestive issues back when he was with Nathan as well, because he did that year, 2017, he was also, everyone was at their biggest, basically. So although I'm a competitor, I'm a big fan of strongman, and it was cool. Like, it was pretty eye-opening as well to see just how big these dudes were there. Like, that's the year that Eddie Hall won, and like, man, he was
way bigger than you.
Big.
You were 6'5", 180 kilos, or 4 or 5 pounds ish, and they were bigger than that.
Yeah. I mean, Thor, like, he would have been over 200 kgs, and he's like 6'9", and then Shaw, I don't know, I swear he would have been over 200 kgs. Like, he had that moon face kind of thing going on as well.
So he was doing the cheap Tuesdays as well.
Probably. Well, he had YouTube videos at the time eating like 2 cheesecakes or something like that. So,
I remember that. Yeah.
But that year of World's Strongest Man was very static. So it kind of like it had both a squat and a deadlift in the finals. So it kind of pushed everyone to go in that direction, because when you're talking static strength, like if you're heavier, that's just going to make it easier.
Yeah, for sure. Is there any strongman news to finish off this show, Colm, for the coming weeks? Or are we saving that for the next episodes?
So I wanted to, well, because someone mentioned it, Thor's. I was going to talk about Thor.
Let's do it.
So it's interesting, right? So me and Thor, I think we're the same age. He might be like a little bit younger. Sorry, a little bit older. But I find it very interesting. So he's already been the world's strongest man. He's won every show there is. I probably, at his very prime, would consider him probably the strongest man who ever lived. Like if you put him against anyone else in the world. And he retired for health reasons, because being that big and putting that much strain on the body is not the healthiest. And he went to do boxing, where they were allegedly going to make $1 million or whatever. Don't know if they did or not, but he's done that, and now he's still got that bug. Like I don't know, have you guys seen what he said he wants to do?
No, he came in. He threw here in Austin at that Rogue Invitational.
At the Arnold?
When was that?
Yes.
No, the Rogue Invitational end of last year. And then he said he might be coming out of retirement, but I can't remember if he mentioned what he was going to do.
Yep. So he's announced that he wants to break the all-time powerlifting record this year, and then he's going to return to strongman next year. And so the lifts that he has to beat, I think he basically has to squat 500, bench 270, or these are the dumbbells lifts, and then deadlift 900 pounds. So basically he's saying he's just going full bore again. He's not just coming back, but he's coming back to be the strongest person in history. He wants to, he's not content having won World's Strongest Man, the Arnold. He now wants to set the all-time powerlifting record, which no strongman has done that in years and years and years. So if you take that out alone, right, there's not really any other strongman at the moment. He's crossing sports. So to compare, it's not the best comparison, but let's say MMA, right? Conor McGregor, MMA fighter, let's say that's strongman, lots of different disciplines. And then Conor McGregor went over to boxing, and it's just the one discipline. So that's kind of like Thor. He's got access to all these events, and now he's going over to powerlifting, which is just the 3 static lifts. So it's a different sport. And I find it interesting in terms of both his goals, they're huge, but also at someone the same sort of age as him, just the risks of health, the fact that he's coming back, I find it pretty intriguing. As a fan, I like it because I want to see what he can do, but I absolutely think he could get these lifts, but I feel like he has to, the one caveat he's said is he wants to do all this at about 400 pounds body weight, which is quite a bit lighter than when he was at his biggest, around 200 kgs. Personally, I think if he was to bulk up, you got to remember this guy's 6'9". If he was about 220, I have no doubt he would break the all-time powerlifting record. That's a big man, 220 kgs. Yeah. But you got to remember he's been about 210 before. I think at his very biggest, maybe 205. So I don't think it's unrealistic he could get that big. But to lift these numbers he's talking about at a body weight of 180 or 185, I think is going to be, and to do it this year, I really think it's going to be a bit of a stretch. But yeah, as a fan, I'm quite interested to see how he goes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, as you mentioned, the strain on the body, obviously the bigger you are, the more strain on your heart, etc., etc. And I'm sure to break a lot of these records too, there's obviously pharmacology likely involved.
Yep, none of this is tested.
Yeah. So I guess that's another thing. But I think Mona probably resonates with what he's doing, because obviously leaving the sport and then wanting to come back and doing a sport, you have that thing of wanting to be the best. I know Mona's always talking about she doesn't want to just participate in something.
Yeah.
she wants to go win medals. Mona?
And I think it's hard sometimes, like mentally, to 100% retire and be like, I'm done now, because I also know having that goal is what drives me. And I'm still, even though I haven't now competed internationally since, well, I competed internationally, was at the beginning of last year when I did the international comp in New Zealand. But yeah, I always said that I do want to make a comeback. But talking about health and just, dropping body weight, I know even in the sport of weightlifting, as soon as a person drops weight, it's a lot harder to be as strong as what you used to be. Like I always used to compete under 64. Last year, I ended up competing under 59s. And even though I could definitely feel I was getting back to my strength again, I think I was at about like 85%, maybe close to 90%. Obviously before, getting pregnant and the baby, etc. But yeah, it's so hard being a lighter body weight, having that strength. But then, like you said, Com, if you compete in such, how can I say, if you have to be so heavy and, having to put so much risk on, just eating so much and getting to that point where it actually becomes unhealthy, it definitely could affect things. And also your age plays a big role as well. And as soon as I mean, I don't know how old Thor is now. I'm assuming probably in his 30s.
Yeah, he's 34, I believe.
34, okay. Yeah, and I've definitely felt, getting into the 30s, everything is a lot slower.
You don't want to give away your age, Mona?
Well, me and Thor seems to be the same age, so if he's doing a comeback, I must do a comeback too then, I guess, right? He will be
same here. I'm 34 as well. I'm coming back.
Oh wow, okay, yeah, then we all need to do a comeback, document our journeys.
Well, this is recorded now, so the goal is in place.
Okay, yeah. So
what I was going to ask, in weight, so in strongman, right, and in powerlifting, since when I've started, everyone's kind of said guys peak, like maximal strength wise, kind of mid-30s to 40, so a little bit older. And I think this applies both with both tested powerlifting and non-powerlifting with strongman, because you just have more time to mature, learn your technique and whatnot. Obviously, this depends on injury, but I'm curious what it's like in weightlifting, because weightlifting has such a big power component. Whereas powerlifting, you could be slow as hell. If you're just producing a lot of force, you're going to get the weight up. What would you say is the averages for weightlifting?
Well, honestly, Com, it depends on when an athlete starts. For example, I started weightlifting when I was 12 years old. So I would be in the sport now for, over 20 years. And it's definitely, I could find being in the sport that long. I mean, maybe I reached my peak. I don't know, but I would say I tend to see with a lot of female athletes in their later 20s. And then when they get to their 30s, especially the ones who started very similar to when I started, as soon as they get to around 30 and over, that's where, a lot of them might drop a little bit of strength, but you'll also see a lot of them have to really change the way of training. Where we used to train twice a day, we could only train once a day. So you have to train just so much more clever, and you have to make sure that you look after your health and stay on top of if a niggle comes up and those kind of things, where when you were younger, if a niggle comes up, you would, sometimes you'll just train past it and it will just go away by itself. But when you get to that late 20s, early 30s, you tend to find that those niggles then turn into bigger injuries at the end of the day. So what I've seen, I can definitely say, I mean, I don't know what research would say, but what I've seen with athletes is definitely closer to, the later 20s when they tend to peak. Although there's so many youngsters now at the moment lifting massive weights. I know there's a Bulgarian athlete, I think he might be 18 years old. He made also history, like not too long ago, he lifted an insane amount of weight at the Worlds. He won gold. And everyone was really surprised. I mean, being like an 18 or 19-year-old, you know, beating adults and kind of just breaking the mold of, you know, athletes being their best later on in life. So yeah, it really depends. I think it depends just when you start, your training age basically, and then just how well you look after your body.
Yeah, for sure. For context as well, Mona in her previous peak, because she's going to have new peaks, 94 snatch, 120 clean and jerk at 63 kg body weight. Nothing to scoff at there. And or maybe we're gonna add the natty tag to it as well, don't we? Or if you add the natty tag, does that make it like seem like it's not natty because you had to call it natty? Either way.
It seems like that. People normally say if you have to say you're natty, then normally you're not natty. But I guess if it comes from another person, then you can claim it, you know. But yeah, with us, you know, even during my Olympic prep and before that, you know, being tested, randomized, being on a program where they would come, if you are in university and you're studying, they would come to your university and wait until your lecture is finished, but watch you like a hawk, making sure that, you know, you don't leave their sites, doing dope testing, and then basically rocking up at your house at 5 a.m. in the morning, you know, doing blood tests, urine tests, making sure that you are clean. You know, unfortunately, like some of the athletes who have tested positive in the past, like their results come out really late. So sometimes these athletes tend to still participate in the international events, you know, winning gold medals, breaking world records, and then later on getting their positive result back of like a month prior to the competition. And it takes a lot of praise away from the athlete who could have been on that podium. I mean, if you are an athlete and on the day you come fourth and it comes out 3 years later that now you've moved up to second place, I mean, it takes away from sponsorships, it takes away from so many missed opportunities which you would have had. So I definitely feel like, you know, if results came out quicker, then it would be a lot better as well for athletes. I know I kind of went down a rabbit hole there, but yeah, I'm just showing, you know, they do test. Too. Yeah, they do test the athletes, and the ones who are taking stuff, hopefully they do all get caught. But yeah, it just sometimes takes a bit longer.
Yeah. So I think we'll wrap this one up here. We've been a little over an hour now. We've probably fleshed out a bunch of other topics for future podcasts too. So for anyone listening now, this will be taken down after the stream, but will be re-uploaded tomorrow once I go through and edit everything and add everything to it. And then we'll also be on all your favorite podcast platforms. We're going to do this weekly right now. We'll probably usually do it at this time on this day every week, or it might be the following day at the same time. We're just working around there as we get this thing started. But if you liked it, please make sure when we post it, you share it, you like it, you comment, everything, all that good stuff that's going to help us with the algorithms on YouTube, Facebook, wherever it is. That all helps. But no, that's our first episode all wrapped up. And I guess we'll see everyone next week.